Hello and welcome to UFO Classified. I am your host, Erica Lukes. I have been a very proud host of this show for over 5 years, and at my side has been Mario, my dear friend, who has helped me along the way, and all of the wonderful people that listen from around the world. I want to give a shout out to Tony Eccles, who is over in the UK. We have been chatting a lot. He was with Bufora, and he is giving me good ideas of areas to focus on, and we have a great simpatico, and I'm looking forward to learning more. I hope that, Tony, I hope that you and your family feel better, and I look forward to talking more. I also want to just say on behalf of myself and all of the people that listen to this show that I think all of us have just been in horror at the events that have happened over this past week. And our love and our thoughts and our prayers are going to the people in the Ukraine as they suffer horrible losses and deal with things that no living human being should have to deal with. This is affecting them, and we know that if we can open our arms and open our hearts and try to help any way we can, that we will. And so anyway, I want to just also say and kind of segue into the fact that, I've talked a little bit about the fact that in the UFO community, in the UFO world, La La Land, unfortunately we get in here and we like to go down rabbit holes and we start believing in different conspiracies because we're open-minded and because the world is full of unlimited possibilities. And sometimes those conspiracies can lead us down rabbit holes that have been manipulated and that are not in our greater good. I say this a lot, and I feel that this is what has happened, and we see this now again with QAnon and some of the people that are supporting Russia and even saying that, hey, Putin, way to go, Putin. No, not way to go. Women and children and brave men are dying, and a country is being invaded, and this is wrong. And so I would definitely say, if you get into ufology, make sure that you're studying something that is true. It isn't tainted with all of this garbage that will lead you to actually glorify somebody like Putin. That is my thing there. But actually, wait, I've got one more thing. So this week on a TV show, well, actually, maybe it was last week, there was a certain security guard from Skinwalker Ranch that made his appearance with a blurred face and a disguised voice, as if we don't know who it is. And why they would blur his face and disguise his voice when we all know who it is completely beyond me. I'm not sure if it would have anything to do with his criminal past as of late, or really what that would have to deal with. But it is interesting to note, because I have documented for the past 3 years statements that have been made by this individual over and over and over again, that now again the story's changed. And so now not only was it an MRI, but it was an EKG and blood tests and yada, yada, yada. And no, that's not what happened. And I will say that when, again, you look at Skinwalker Ranch, there's been a new interview that Joe McGurry did with Colm Kelleher and George Knapp, and they're now talking about an area next to one of the Air Force bases in the 70s that, they have all of these witness interviews, and the place was exactly like Skinwalker Ranch. And so now what you're seeing is they've taken an area which was narrowly focused for a long time, right? So it was only happening at Skinwalker Ranch. There was only a vortex. This place was special. And then when all of a sudden maybe things start changing, the public sentiment starts shifting, and we might need some funding or whatever we're going to do when we're telling tales about dinosaur beavers and whatever you've got going on out there, maybe drunk people, I don't know. But you've got all of these stories. It's like, oh yeah, let's broaden the scope, because this is a global threat. We have got shape-shifting werewolves and drunk security guards with blackface makeup and ghillie suits hiding in the bushes and all sorts of stuff. I don't know, but that's definitely, it's a global security threat. So here's what I have to say. Shut up and show us your data. Because so far you've got nothing but a bunch of stupid stories that most people with a brain can say, yeah, you guys are full of it. And I must say, it did take me a while. And I did throw my feet into the fire on that one. And on that note, one more thing before we get my guest on this evening, I want to say, you know that over the years I have gone down a lot of the rabbit holes that all of us go down when we get into this. And I have been very open with what I've gone through. You've seen my life right in front of you every week, every Friday. And when I have made mistakes, I have come on the air and said, I made a big mistake. You've seen it. I will acknowledge that. And for me, I'm not about going out and building big platforms where I'm making a ton of money, obviously, because I'm still only making enough to not even cover costs for the show. And I appreciate all the lovely people that help me even do that. I love it. I love you guys. Thank you. But that's not my goal. My goal is to research this subject and to give you the truth and to open my kimono and show the world the pitfalls of this subject. I don't have an agenda other than the truth. And if that means hitting somebody on the chin every once in a while because they are lying to all of us, then I'm going to do that. And I will continue to do that. And there's really not a lot that any of you people out there that are trying to stop me can do. With that note, I'm just so spicy. So I would like to welcome my friend back to the show. And Ted and I have been friends for a long time. I feel very blessed to have him in my life. We've had some interesting adventures together. I've learned a lot from him. And I really, Ted, again, thank you for being on the show. And I want to say you are, somebody that also has been very helpful with me through the personal things that I've gone through. And I appreciate that as well. I do consider you a dear friend. And I always love, just picking your brain, getting ideas. And even though you and I are very spirited, we have very spirited debates that sometimes, ends with like not talking for a while, but then we get back to it because we have different ideas on things. Yep. But I want to say thank you for all of you guys in chat. I just got into chat. So hey Utah, hey Ken, and thank you for the donation, Amy. Love you guys. Thanks for being here on a Saturday night. Anyway, so thank you, and Jim. Anyway, so Ted, you're taking on a new role, and thank you, Scott, so much. You're taking on a new role, and that is with the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, and that is a professional society in the field of aerospace engineering. And so this is a new but very fitting platform for you to help kind of foster UAP research, and then also give people that are coming into this your experience working with NARCAP, which you have been, the executive director of for almost 2 decades now.
Ooh.
So, wow.
Yeah, 22 years.
Wow. Isn't that crazy how time flies? And then you look in the mirror and you go, got it. That's where that went.
Yeah, time flies when you're running like hell,
Yeah. So tell us what's going on, what's happening lately, what are the cool things that you are working on?
Well, first off, I want to be really clear that what I'm talking about has nothing to do with NARCAP. No, this isn't any, other than the experience I've garnered doing that work. NARCAP is not associated or affiliated with this process at all. And with that, what happened was, I think we all know that the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released a report in June last summer. And along with citing the reality of UAP, for whatever they might be, they stated 3 primary concerns. One was national security, one was aviation safety, and one was stigma that was inhibiting research and keeping good minds from looking at the subject. So about a week and a half after that, I got a phone call from the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics asking if I would present at a special session of their AV21 conference. And they had gathered 5 other speakers to present as well on advocating for UAP research in the scientific community. And about a month after that, they called us back and invited us to actually set up an organization within the AIAA to address UAP and their effects on aviation safety, and to push back a bit on this stigma. And so for the last number of months, we've been working to put this program together and going through program design and development. And I'm happy to announce that we're in motion. We have a community of interest right now on Twitter under AIAA underscore UAP, at AIAA underscore UAP on Twitter. And soon we'll have a website or a web page dedicated on the AIAA website. We're preparing for AV22, which should be a much more extensive series of presentations. And while I can't speak to the entire speakers list, I can say we have an incredible lineup of people that in the mainstream to speak about this. So go ahead, please.
No, I mean, that's fantastic. And I want to ask you and just kind of jump back a little bit to learn a little bit more about the history of the AIAA. And, I know that they've been looking at Androphile's files. They've been involved in the UAP subject for a long time, but give us the history of kind of their involvement over the decades with regard to UAP and what makes what you're doing new and different, and how you're, just give us some details.
Sure. Well, in the background, I mean, as a kid, I remember I had a UAP encounter, and I had gone to the library, try to understand what was going on. And I look in the Dewey Decimal System, right, under A, and there's AIAA, American, Aeronautics and Astronautics Journal, with an article on UFOs called the AIAA Statement on UFOs. And I read that, and it was clear that there's something interesting going on there. But my understanding is that the effort died on the vine inside of AIAA. You hear this? That's
Yes.
my big dog.
Oh.
That's my big dog drinking some water there. He'll be finished in a second. Looky doke. So there was really nothing more going on with AIAA as far as I know. I think there was some kind of behind the scenes or some underground inquiries that were going on, like you mentioned with Androphile, and they put together a conference, I think, in LA, centered around UFOs at one point. The local chapter did. But other than that, there wasn't a lot of traction. And all the time that I worked on NARCAP, I felt that it was important to see the AIAA get in motion on this subject. And I advocated for that inside the organization, but had no real success with that until, it was AIAA that made the overtures to us last summer. So that was really where they picked up the ball. And I never imagined that 50 years later I'd be part of the story,
Well, good for you. You've worked really hard. So I think it's impressive. And I know, you're really excited about some of the people that you're working with and new avenues to look very seriously at the subject. And I want to just read something from Amy, who's always in here, and I love Amy, and give Dinah a big kiss for me. But she says the AIAA truly is professional engineers, pilots, project managers, and they will not suffer things like the blue chicken cult.
Yeah, that's a fact. That's a fact. And,
I know.
And I have to be very careful. It's a very cautious development cycle that we're working through right now. And even in talking to you about it, I have to be really, really careful about what
you are very, very.
Which is kind of a reflection of the way I approach things all along. That's kind of why I survived 22 years on the street level of ufology, riding the ranges with my UFO research team, and now I get invited to come in and, wear clothes and stop spitting on the floor and have to use proper language. It's professionalism,
Oh my! Oh no!
That was probably the greatest pain I suffered working in the UFO field, was the inability to develop professional standards around me, and constantly suffering from people who refuse to engage professionally. I kind of turned my back on the field about 5 years ago and just focused on NARCAP and focused on our message, which was aviation safety, and did that work. And now I've kind of matriculated into this other process. Our focus is very similar at AIAA, but it's not derivative of the work we did at NARCAP.
Doesn't that feel good, though, I mean, get out of the cesspool and engage with people that are these incredibly brilliant minds that want to move things forward and have a serious discussion, and then, use the scientific method. I think that is so refreshing. And you and I have talked about Norway and Erling so many times, because that really is a great example of how science can broach this topic. And I want you to describe for us, I'm sure most people listening to this show understand it, but what is the importance of the scientific method, and what should people be doing who are claiming that they are doing UFO research that might not be? Is transparency a part of that?
Oh, yes. Yeah, transparency. Really, if you want a good understanding of what true standards of research are, perhaps go to the Open Science Foundation website and take a look at their standards, because they define it, research and publication standards for the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences, and probably 5,000 other scientific organizations, doing everything from medical research to astronomy. And the whole point is that if you're, for example, if you're going to bring a paper giving examples, sharing data, information based on data that you collected, you need to put that data somewhere where people can look at it and they can replicate your work and build on it. You have to share it. There's none of this keeping it locked up and turning it into a tourist trap or whatever it is that people decide to do with it to monetize it or make themselves important. What's important is the information. And that's the difference between science and ufology in general. Almost nobody in ufology that I know is actually working on getting the answer. They're on the podiums talking about their speculation and their ideas and this and that, but the real results driven answer is not something people are looking for. And that's all I've been after for 22 years, is that. And it's pushed me into some pretty rarefied environments, because it's such a no nonsense and direct engagement, as it should be. And that's part of what alienated me straight out of ufology, was just, you can't do that there.
Well, you can't. And I will say that I've met some of the best people of my life that have been involved in the UFO subject, but they're also people that listen to the show and they're critical of things, as they should be, because you get into this topic and you're hearing things about Serpo and, all of these tall tales and ebens and whatever little hobgoblins, the big-nosed aliens and all sorts of things, and you're also going to conferences, and you're giving a revenue to a pedophile, a convicted pedophile. And so you've got this really seedy underbelly of people that are not dedicated to finding the truth and engaging this the way it needs to be engaged. And so I just think it's very cool that you are making great strides, and you've continued to do that for so many years.
Well, thank you. For the longest time, we had a moratorium on conferences, and we existed for 7 or 8 years before we did that. That's with NARCAP, and I did a few since then. The last one I did, you and I both spoke at, the 2017 International UFO Congress. I think I did one after that. I did the Nova Scotia thing, but the whole point is you go to these conferences, and what is actually done, what's actually forwarded. I remember a couple walking up to me and in the meet and greet, so I took a moment and said, did you enjoy the talks? And oh yes. And so who did you like the most? Oh, we don't pay any attention to the names. Well,
That was perfect timing.
Apparently I have something on my phone here, but yeah, the lack of critical minds, and the need to perform. We're not here to perform. The work I do is not about performing. I'm trying to get an answer to a very, very important question, and it's because I've been exposed to it. I've seen it, and more than once, and I understand that it's really important. And if we want to know what it's about, we have to kind of move aside all the personalities and nonsense and focus on taking one fact to the next one, without bias, And if it leads us away from the subject into our own minds, and it turns out to be a bunch of nonsense, then let's find that out. I don't think personally that's where it's going to go, but our work, the work I'm doing with AIAA right now, is to validate or disprove the ODNI report, and then build on that if there's a there, and it looks like there is. Without using any of the data that all of us are familiar with ufology. I mean, I know it all. I did 30 years of ufology. I know all of the cases and all of the people. I worked. Dr. Vali was on our staff. Dr. Haynes was our chief scientist. Dr. Heisch, Dr. McCampbell. You know, we had a number of the top minds in the field that I mentored under, and all I did was just bring more focus. You know, that's my work right now.
And you know, it's so interesting, and I feel very lucky. I say this all the time, but to have Anne Druffel's archives here, because I can look through and see all these relations that she had with the people that you're talking about, and see all the personal correspondence between all of them, and see how, you know, like with Jim McCampbell, noticing that, you know, he, I think through the years when he was in the research, if I could speak English, what is wrong with me? Wow, that was kind of frightening. You know, I mean, he kind of went towards more, this was a man-made kind of phenomenon. So, and I just want to pause really quickly. Scott, you're not big on UFO conferences in Ireland, but you know what? Why don't we all plan one? Because I think Mama needs to come to Ireland. That's all
Well,
I'm saying.
let's just make sure the standards are high. You know,
Yeah.
I'm representing AIAA now, so you've got to put together an event that can have somebody like me come to it, right? And that's probably not going to involve fairy rings, although they may be relevant sometime down the line. The conversation isn't ready for it yet. So
Right. And so,
nuts and bolts.
when you look at people talking about dino beaver sightings, I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, first off, I'm the last person to judge what another person says they saw, because I've seen some things. Um, and on the flip side, I'm not going down that road because it has nothing to do with why I'm here. And I have a single-minded focus, and I'm sticking with that. I'm not going to whistle past the graveyard. I'm going to find out what UAP and UFO are, and um, and whatever I learn, I'm going to try and share, and it'll be grounded in science. And I'll have aviation scientists and engineers and technicians and everybody else standing behind me, all nodding their heads with whatever it is we decide this thing's about. So,
And I think, you know, that's a really graceful answer. I think, you know, I've had experiences. I wouldn't be here if I had not had interesting experiences in my life. And that, not only that, but I find that the subject immensely fascinating, and I've learned a lot about a lot of different subjects. But I think for scientists who are going out there and saying, you know, this is otherworldly radiation, or this is, you know, I mean, this is an alien demonic presence, you know, I mean, it's like, or to, you know, I mean, it's like over the years people have said all these things, and yet there's been not a scrap of evidence that's been shared with the public. And you stated earlier that that's an important thing. You have to be transparent. You have to share the information so other people, other scientists can come in and look at what is happening. And you know, I just think it's so lacking. And so congratulations for getting out of the UFO, you know, field, the
well,
cat box.
ideally, we're going to be facilitating conversations in a neutral fashion between science and technology and engineering. We'll have calls for papers, and we'll be inviting people to write, and then giving them the opportunity to defend their positions. And quite frankly, I don't think you want to go in there with dino beavers. You know, you're going to get
Interesting.
yeah, you could get chewed up. I'll tell you what, you know, I did the presentation at the AV21 conference, and it was 20 minutes of presenting our findings from NARCAP, just to give an overview of what's kind of commonly understood about UAP and aviation safety at this point. And In it, I mentioned that I'd had an observation that I'd seen a UAP. And I'll tell you, it was difficult to do. I set my mind to do it because they need to understand that these things are observed, and that there are people, researchers, who see them, and that they can be seen, and whatever they are. And but it was tricky to do that. The way I did it was I couched it in science. I talked about the color that I saw coming off of it, and I offered a speculative idea that it might have something to do with emission frequencies, ionization related to the emission frequencies of atmospheric atoms or molecules, and that really lit up the conversation for a bit. But that was as far into it as I could go, and from that point forward, I really, other than to say that I've seen them, I can't talk about them much. And some of you who know me know that my experiences are kind of extensive, and but the system isn't ready for that yet. What we need to do is build one block at a time, and we need to leave my story out of it. We need to let the data speak for itself. We're going to move on from anecdotes, and we're going to start talking about multi-sensor observations and their implications. What is it we're looking at? Physical analysis of movement, these kind of things. So we're taking it to another level, and we're focusing on it, not on some ideas around it or any of that. We're looking right at it and the information we can get from it, and what we might sort of extrapolate just enough to develop a research arc on, cautiously.
And again, I want to just read something that Amy put in chat. She just said, I would suspect the kind of data that they would want would be related to geolocation, flight performance, radar, and infrared sightings, and all the statistics, and would never mention the A word.
The A word?
Alien. Or it could be
Oh,
something else.
yeah. Well, that's all right. We aren't really, if it comes to that, we're not going to shy away from it. But she's right. That's what we're going to be looking at. Those are the directions we're going in. AIAA has technical committees that deal with everything, propulsion, all kinds of ideas, and they foster dialogue around all of it that furthers the world aviation system. So we'll be doing it in that context, and we'll be doing it the way they do it, and we'll be focused on science and not on, like she said, the A word. Nobody's throwing that out, but it's just let the data tell you that. Don't stand in front of it and say, I think this is, look, see, aliens, right? Look at me,
Mm-hmm.
Aliens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not how we get there, And I'll tell you, if people really believe that we're dealing with non-human intelligences that are active inside the Earth domain, then take it seriously. No speculation. Look carefully at the data. Understand what makes information helpful, and let's move this thing forward. Because if that's the case, then it's even more important that we get it right.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. That's great to say that. Thank you. And so, tell us about some of the people that are involved in the AIAA, because I was looking at the website again today, and there's some pretty incredible people that have been involved, that are involved.
Yeah, we have a pretty good core team. There's only 5 of us that are actually running the process right now. It's Dr. Ravi Koparapu. He's a astrophysicist, and he and a colleague of his, Jacob Hawk Misra, wrote an article for Scientific American last year, and they did a presentation recently at SETI Talk, and that was pretty good. So that's Dr. Kaparapu. There's Philippe Alieris, who works with UFO data, who's a very competent project manager, and I'm not sure what his science background is, but his focus has been on satellite surveillance. We have Mr. Ryan Graves. He's a former fighter pilot, and with some direct experience with the subject. I'm sure your listeners would know. He's also a very good project manager and team lead. And then we have the last one is Peter Reale, who's I believe he's an electrical engineer, or retired now, but made his way as an electrical engineer. Wrote some. I think he's a physicist. He wrote some wrote a study on kinematics and UAP, presented on that at the AV21 conference. So that's our core team. Of course we have executive sponsors and relationships inside the organization that are supported as well.
Well, it just sounds so fascinating. Give us a bigger picture of the whole organization.
Well, American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics is a member organization. It's nonprofit. They've got about 30,000 members. It's a professional society of aviation scientists, aeronautical scientists, and engineers, or astronautical scientists and engineers. And they deal with anything that takes to the air, whether it's UAVs or rockets, space travel, air traffic management, space traffic management. For example, we're coming into the drone age, and where we're going to be seeing working drones, day to day as we're out driving around doing what we need to do. So they need to establish how that gets done, and how that's managed so that, there's safety and the way it needs to be, how these things might need to communicate with each other. And there's a whole thing, and that's just around that. We got another thing. We have air taxis coming on and flying cars, and that's coming up. And AIAA is taking on, a lot of that work as well. Supersonic aircraft as transports, reviving the supersonic industry. That's a bailiwick of the AIAA. They work in a lot of things. The 70 some technical committees, 9 integration and outreach committees, a number of communities of interest, and they deal with just every aspect of aviation and aviation sciences. It's really fascinating. I knew it was big, but when I was starting to get briefed on what it was and how it worked, it was so interesting to me that they would invite us to be involved with the process, given we weren't AIAA officers and didn't know what the organization was or how it was structured. And there was a real learning curve there for a couple of months. We kind of spun in circles trying to figure out who we were and what we were doing. But then it took right off. We got traction, and now we have a community of interest established, and we're preparing to offer some more support and work in this area.
Wow, and that is so fascinating. I mean, just to learn all about that, and I mean, you bring up a great point. There's so much flying around right now, and I will tell you that the past 3 weeks, I was walking out of my studio. You've heard this story, whatever. Mario's heard this story, but I was walking out of my business and with some clients, and a drone flew over the top of the business and then circled back, and then just last week I was driving downtown, quite some distance away from my business, and it looked like the same type of drone was flying over the car. And so there's so much going on with regard, I think, to surveillance, and what are some of the agencies doing with drone technology, and what are people that maybe we should be concerned about having drones and incursions in different places that are secured facilities. What are your, when you guys are learning all about this and how to identify specific things, like what would you tell people, and how to make a good decision on what you're seeing, observing?
Well, I think with drones, one of the big clues is that they tend to be close observations, and you can hear them. They make a pretty distinctive noise most of the time. Even the little, quad rotors, they have a buzz, and if you're close enough, you can hear them. So that's the first thing to look at. Of course, the second thing is shape, if you can make it out. And then the third thing is don't jump to any conclusions if you think it might be a drone. Just if there's enough gray area in there, say it might be a drone. Don't assume that it's a UAP. There's mandatory lighting on drones. Getting familiar with that is helpful in identifying them as well. But they're going to change. They're adapting to what they're needed for, whether it's delivering pizzas or small boxes from Amazon or whatever they're going to use them for. Delivering medical help. I don't know. Maybe you get your pharmaceuticals delivered. That way. Who knows what we're going to see the industries and the businesses look like, and then you're not really going to be able to tell who those drones belong to. And if you have privacy concerns, you're going to want to make steps accordingly, knowing that.
What restrictions are there with regard to flying a drone?
You have to have a license. You have
And
to
is
be.
that true all over the country?
I'm not sure of that, but I'm pretty sure it is. That's a federal licensing, and I think it's FCC licensing. Um, but yeah, you have to have a license for it, and so you're accountable for it. There's places you can't fly it, like restricted airspace. You can't fly it around airports, flight paths, this kind of thing. Um, and as we work with these things more, those regulations are going to expand, right? To protect people's privacy. Maybe you can't fly them over neighborhoods. You know, maybe towns can mandate whether they want a drone free area. This kind of thing. So that dialogue's really just starting to heat up, and we're just starting to find what the problems are, right? For example, I was sitting in a park meditating a while back. Those who know me know I do a bit of that. So I'm sitting in this park full of manuka trees, and I can hear somebody flying a drone, and I'm sitting here with my back straight and my eyes closed, and I open my eyes, and there's a drone hovering about 8 feet in front of my face looking at me.
Oh
Well, that's
goodness.
intrusive. Yeah, that's intrusive, and so what are the limits? How far do you go with it? What's okay and what is not, and what's proper etiquette with your drone? Never mind what the regulations and the laws are. So all of this is it's in flux right now, and these conversations are taking place, and AIAA is part of that. They're very involved in policy, or not very involved, but they do policy work. So a lot of the time they're representing the civilian side on issues that are kind of edgy or on the fence a little bit. And for example, even with this UAP matter we're dealing with here, we may find ourselves having to support policy initiatives that give us transparency and access to data, for example, from the Pentagon. How do we go about getting that material in order to bring our safety planners into the conversation? Because right now, and the way it's been for the entire time I've been doing this work, the data flows away from the aviation system and right out of the hands of aviation safety planners. You can go through any number of UFO cases and see aviation safety factors in the case, but it left aviation and went into the DoD or into ufology, and it was never considered as a serious issue to be looked into further.
So, and let me ask you, because I'm sitting here and I've got, like the Center for UFO Studies. I've got tons of files from QFOS, and then they're talking, back in the 70s about, they're working with police officers from all over the country. They're working with the FAA, and they're trying to do things very similar to what we're trying to do now. So when did that kind of move away from people like the Center for UFO Studies, people that were doing QFOS?
Well, if you remember, New Fork was founded by Bob Gribble
Mm-hmm.
many moons ago before Peter stepped up, and he was sending out stickers with the phone number on it to
Yes,
every fire department,
yep.
every airport, this kind of thing. So he was part of that information gathering program, and then of course Mark Rodiger of QFOS, right, and that crew were trying to do similar work across the emergency services people and FAA. And you can only go so far with that. And the FAA kind of quashed it with when they stopped allowing pilots to make reports on UFOs. You go to the manual, they literally tell you take it somewhere else. If you want to report a UFO, you can contact a civilian reporting center like New Fork. So
So when did that start then? So you had the 70s, 80s.
um,
When did?
as far as I know, it was by the late 80s they had that regimen in place. I've never seen an instruction otherwise when I've looked at the manuals. Before that, there was Service and JANAP 126, and those were communication instructions for visually important sightings, right? And that was back when we didn't have satellite coverage that could tell us that there were Russian bombers coming over the pole, right?
Mm-hmm.
So pilots, if they saw something, they were obligated to report it and then to keep their mouths shut about it. And sometimes that involved UFOs, and they weren't allowed to talk about that either. And I think in the late 50s, a group of pilots actually got together and kind of protested against that a little bit, but it went nowhere. And it wasn't until the late 70s that we had that satellite coverage, and those particular regimes were eased off here in the United States. They're still active in Canada, is my understanding. They still have Service in Canada. So uh, and I could imagine what it was like when the UAP task force last year went into the FAA and said, "So show us all this great UFO stuff that you captured and all these pilot reports." And they said, "We don't take those reports, and we haven't for 30 years." What was that like? I mean, I looked at the ODNI report, and they listed what the FAA was capable of, but they didn't say that the FAA had a wealth of data for them, and they should have. Whatever this was about, they should have had a stack of cases to hand over.
And
We sure
so,
got them.
I mean, you've got people working with the FAA up until the 80s, and then, what happens when all the cases are diverted to Bigelow?
Well, yeah, exactly. And I was never intimidated by that. He put that up about a year after we got NARCAP started, and I just shrugged it off because, first off, they don't care about aviation safety. They don't care about anything. They're just trying to suck up the data, and they're not doing anything with it in the public. There's nothing altruistic about the work they were doing, and our whole purpose was aviation safety. And I doubt very much. I mean, if the FAA referred them out anywhere, I will bet you that cost an awful lot of reporters just saying, no, I'm not going to do it. And I had, and a number of the reporters that I had said that they contacted us afterwards because friends told them about it, but they weren't going to make a report through the FAA or anybody the FAA recommended. And the understanding there in my work is that the cases we know of, which aren't many because I had a little data collection program, the tip of the iceberg. There are many, many more cases than we know about. Now, doesn't mean necessarily all of them are UAP, but there are many more pilots who are saying they saw things that they couldn't resolve than we know about. Many more. So the whole process has been about trying to get to those people in that number.
So have the protocols, have they changed? Have the standards changed? So if you're filtering sightings reports, obviously, as you mentioned, Bigelow wasn't doing anything with the cases that had ever been made public, or really it was a data collection thing. And so
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what the standard was for the FAA to say, hey, just go over to this organization, or if there was any standard at that point in time.
I don't think so. I don't think there was a standard. I do know that the few times that I tried to get NARCAP involved with that process, I got told that it wouldn't be fair to the other organizations, even though we were the only one doing aviation safety, right, and working with pilots.
And who specifically said that?
Well, the party that handles the version control on the airman instruction manual, the aeronautical instruction manual for the FAA, and their air traffic control manual. But the people that write those things were concerned about balance and fairness, and so their choice was not to do anything. And the FAA wasn't looking at it, NTSB not looking at it. And now all of a sudden, the Pentagon has taken over and is establishing a reporting regimen across government. So FAA, NTSB, everybody's going to get a schooling on this, and then all of that data is going to move centrally to the DoD, and then be processed, and we're going to get told whatever they want us to know about it. And this is kind of my hope in working in other areas, to see that we have a little bit of influence there, and that information that's important gets to aviation safety planners before we lose souls on board.
And so how does that, you've got To the Stars Academy, that when they first came out, they were very much about, we're going to be the big data collection hub. We're going to make these apps for your phone, and you can get on there and, just tell us about your sighting, and we'll get it, right then and there. And so how does that, take the wind out of their sails? Not that they've done anything anyway, but
no. Well, that's the point. Okay, they've gone defunct as far as I know. They're not doing much of anything. And here's the thing, though. Let's remember why we were collecting these cases to begin with. You've done case collection and analysis, so have I. But the reason we were doing it was to make sure that if something happened, that we had as much documentation as we could, so that the powers that be would look at it and make good decisions around it. Now that that's starting to move, the relevance of a data collection and investigation program falls off a bit. At least in the core ones that we do, which are nuts and bolts. It flew by at what time, it looked like X, right? Now what we need is a multidisciplinary approach that I'm working in aviation sciences and engineering, but we need psychology and sociology weighing in on this too, because it may well be that the people that they learn about that are claiming to have UFO encounters aren't necessarily all full of it, and there may be sociological implications in the larger picture over this information, depending on what it reveals. So there's room for other sciences, hard and soft sciences, and all of this. And until we really weigh in on all these different angles, we're really kind of missing the import of the subject itself.
Right, and there's so many facets, as you mentioned, to all of this. I mean, it's how fallible is a witness. How educated is the witness. I mean, and is there like a group kind of think involved with sightings? And it's like you go, and I hate to keep mentioning Skinwalker Ranch. I'm sorry, it's kind of what I've been researching for a long time. But you take a place like that, and it's like you've put a myth into the ethos, and you've got okay, you're gonna go here and something's gonna happen, and just, oh my gosh, there might be a shapeshifter behind a bush or different things like that. And so you're really using a form of psychological warfare to to go out there and manipulate the public opinion, and then you get somebody in there and and they're seeing things and feeling things because that's what you've been primed to believe. So
well, I've heard the same stories with Greer and his little seances, out there in the bushes, and I've heard about how people who were certain they didn't see anything at all were, being coerced into saying that they did. My chief scientist, Dr. Haynes, I think you remember, one of Greer's acolytes claiming that Dr. Haynes had seen UAP during one of their outings and supported Greer's work, but actually it's exactly the opposite. He wrote his book CE5 and said there was no value in what Greer was doing, and that he had gone out and he had seen low-flying aircraft, but he didn't see any UFOs. But yet here we are. We have Greer's people telling us that he did. And why? It has nothing to do with getting to the answer, that's for sure. And whether it's Greer or whether it's Skinwalker, I personally kind of get a giggle out of that word Skinwalker, because a Skinwalker is a witch who can take on the appearance of the skin of the animal that it's wearing. And what a great description of a con. And the fact is, I know there are hot spots. I've been there, and I've seen unusual things there. And I've been there with qualified people like Professor Strand, and I've been there on my own and seen things. But that's very different, I think, than what they've been trying to sell with the Skinwalker myth.
Well, and I think too, you even look up at East City Ranch and things, and I mean, it's you go there, and again, you're being told, you're being pumped up and primed, and so you've got this energy from the group, and it's like you see a light on the hill, and oh my God, it's coming out of a portal, or you look at a rock during the, daytime, and there's a garage door. Oh my God, it's a garage door. The ships are flying out of it. I mean, I was there for that, and I'm just like, oh, okay, wow, this is awkward. It's really, really awkward. But a lot of those lights can be explained. I mean, they were hikers. They're up there, and then you've got people shining lasers right at them, and aircraft going overhead, and people shining lasers at the aircraft, and you just think, shizzle.
Well, and that's just it. People are uncritical. They want to poke something and see it react. And but the reality of it all, I mean, like the work we're doing deals with sensor data. What seems to be coming out of the information is that a good portion of UAP activity doesn't happen in the visual spectrum. We have yet to confirm that, but that's what these multi-sensor detections that the military reported that the DNI used as the foundation for its report. So as we get real sensor data, and we know what to aim at it and how to look at it, then we're going to get better information from it than a couple of people sitting on a hill. These are these people that go and do these things and have these experiences like what you're talking about that seem confabulated, right? It's no different than certain levels of religious experience. It's not an indictment against spiritual existence, but it shows you that human character and egos and awareness in its natural state is not terribly high tuned.
And so let me just go back really quickly, and that's a great point. But Scott is asking, did Dr. Greer have more credibility when he first started in the subject?
Well, I'm not going to cast aspersions too far in all of that. I think we all know what the problem is there, and it got worse over the years. But I'll tell you, back when he did his, what was it? He had that big gathering and hearing on UAP,
Yep.
on UFOs.
Citizen Statement for Disclosure, something. Yep.
Right. It was a big thing, and we were invited to go, and we wouldn't go anywhere near it. And in 22 years, we would never touch anything that was related to Greer and his work.
But I will say that when I first, when I saw that, you had Callahan, was it Callahan from the FAA that was speaking, and you had some people that appeared to be very credible that Greer had brought together, and so it seemed to be, wow, this is really cool. This could be on the up and up, and there was obviously, a bit of money behind what he was doing. So.
Well, I'm not going to say he wasn't successful at whatever that was, but how influential was it over time? And I heard that rumor about Joshua Tree, where Greer came out to Joshua Tree. Do you know that story?
Which one? Why don't you tell us?
Well, I hesitate because I don't have validation, but I understood that he showed up with bodyguards. Do you know that story, Erica?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, it seemed like I'd heard a similar story about Wilcox, but I'm not sure. I need to go
Okay.
back.
Well, so I don't want to go down that road. Other than to say that if we want to know what UAP are, we need to concentrate on the data, not on the people.
But I think it's hard because most of us that are listening to the show, we don't have we don't have a background in science, and so we look to the subject because we've had a sighting and we want to learn more, and it's a fascinating thing, and then you get sucked into some of these people and their beliefs, and you think because this guy's got like 60,000 subscribers on Facebook that he's he's the end all be all, and you just don't really know what you're getting in for. It's a really, I don't know, it can be really ugly. So,
Well, I'm just I'll
and
address
comical, I think, all
yes,
at
and
once.
comical. Be careful. But I'll address 2 points on that. One is that if you train your awareness and your insight, your logic will develop, and you'll be able to connect dots, and you'll be able to detect delusion and BS. But you have to train your awareness and your insight. You got to be able to look inside yourself and look out at the world. You have to have an awareness that is founded not in what you want reality to be, but what it is. So you're not filtering it with what you were hoping reality is about, and then let it talk to you. I'm not a scientist. I'm an administrator, a nerd herder, if you will. I've been working with engineers and scientists for quite some time, and I've been mentored by quite a few of them. And I've kept my own counsel in terms of developing my own critical skills, and making sure that I was able to let go of things like favorite ideas, for what the facts tell me. I've had any number of cases in the past that I thought were pretty strong, debunked, and that's okay. In fact, I've probably done some work myself that probably isn't quite what it looks like, and that's okay too.
And that's great, and that's another thing I like about you, respect about you, is the fact that you're going to admit if something is wrong, and we all go through that. I think that's an important thing. But were there ever people that were in your orbit that were kind of like these mentors, people that we all look up to, because you've been around some pretty impressive people in the subject. But did you ever sit back and just go, after a period of being around them, and think, wait a minute, this person is leading me based on their own belief systems?
It's funny because as I mentioned before, I came to this not as a scientist, but as somebody who'd had exposure, and it was literally a really blatant exposure that got me connected with Dr. Haynes to begin with, and we ended up within less than a year of that incident, with me running a program for him with the acknowledged best minds in the field involved, NASA underground engineers, this kind of thing. And 22 years ago, it was a whole different world. I couldn't speak about anything about personal experience with UAP because it was a death knell. And dealing with that situation, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to get the help I needed to be able to process what I'd been through. And I went through a steady series of breaking down. And nobody around me ever asked me if I was okay. Nobody on this team of vaunted, brilliant men ever looked at me and said, "Hey, you seem to be stressing a bit. Your nervous levels are up. What's going on? How you doing with this? You've been exposed to something very exotic. Are you okay?" Never happened. And my point to this is that when I got to after about 10 years of this, I was in pretty bad shape and really kind of struggling to keep NARCAP and myself functioning and working. And that's when I started looking at the people around me critically, not in a blame sense, but hey, what is going on here? Because we weren't going anywhere. We just wrote this incredible paper on Project Sphere. Maybe some of your folks know about Project Sphere. 20 some papers on UAP that presented spherical lights and objects. And yet there isn't anything in there about the UAP themselves. And and there was always this reticence by these guys to ever actually step forward and take one step up and say, look, all of these colors seem to correspond with the emission frequencies of atmospheric atoms and molecules. We got they never wanted to go any further than that. And like I would talk to Dr. Haynes and I would just get a shrug. I would, what do you think about this? Shrug.
See, and that is so strange to me because, like I said, I'm sitting here and I'm reading this stuff from QFOS. I'm reading some of the stuff, the exchanges that Ann and Haynes had. And I mean, you look at the book CE5 that Haynes wrote, and it's like, I mean, they're what they were really studying psychological factors with regard to people that were having UFO encounters. And so it's surprising that there wasn't a better level of support, I guess, for what you had been through, especially given what I've seen behind the scenes here.
Well, that's part of it, but that they weren't using their critical skills and looking around. Whenever I deal with a witness, one of the first things I say is, "Are you okay? How are you doing?" Because I've lost family over this and friends. I'm certainly I've had employment opportunities come and go around this subject. And it's something you have to be very careful about. It's a loaded topic. Like we have a few of them in our society, but that's one of them. And so it was really frustrating because I'm making all this sacrifice myself, in terms of being associated with this highly stigmatized subject because I've been exposed to it. And then I'm looking at the leaders in the field and they're not leading. They're not taking us anywhere. We're listening to Dr. Vali's ideas about, historical UAP sightings or whatever, but we're not actually looking at what's really happening and getting a real answer. And to somebody who's got trauma around this subject, that's the only thing that matters. And they aren't leading us there. None of them are. Not Greer. None of those guys are leading us where we need to go with that. And the only way we get there is, like I said, we put the data first, we stand behind it, and we collect it, and then we analyze it, and whatever it tells us, that's what we got. I doubt very much we're going to be entertaining any papers on brownies and elves, at least in the beginning.
But, and I've got to kind of go back to, because it's such a delicate subject when you're dealing with somebody who's coming and presenting it, okay, I had this sighting and it rocked my world. And how do you go about being almost clinical? Because in a way I would think, I mean, my thoughts have changed on obviously dealing with that, because I used to be a member of the ERT, and now I just look at myself and go, what in the crap was I thinking? Because I'm not qualified to deal with this at all, and I'm not going to be in a position where I'm leading people down a path where they're thinking they are experiencing things that they might not be experiencing, and dealing with people that could have psychological problems and need serious help, or people that have been traumatized as children and things. There's so many factors that go into it. And so how do you get somebody that's had a sighting and then question them, get good information, and not lead them to believe that they've had an experience? Does that make sense?
Yes. It has to do with listening carefully while they talk, and then carefully asking questions that don't necessarily let them know what you're thinking. It's so you're sitting there and they say they saw this, and so and so next to them thought it was another thing. Why do you suppose they thought it was another thing? Why did they think it was an airplane? Ask questions, but you want to do it empathetically. Like I said, I'm the last person to judge on strange things because I've seen it. I know that there's a there there. I also know that there's a ton of confabulation around it, and illness around it, mental illness around it. So it's hard to be certain that you're getting that story. And that's, of course, why we lean so much for instrument data, this kind of thing, over anecdote. And the anecdotes told us there was something there, and the hardware seemed to support it. So that's the direction we go. But for the witness themselves, and if I was meeting myself 22 years ago, I would have said, don't get involved with ufology and go see a doctor. Talk to somebody who's qualified to help you with trauma, because this is damaging you, and it's impairing your ability to function. And the thing people need to understand is that all trauma are equal. You feel the same way no matter what it was, whether you were attacked by a person or chased down the road by a UFO, or had a shark take a look at you as you went swimming by, or whatever. All of that is the same thing, and it has roots in your childhood, often where you were not that safe to begin with. So you're reliving moments when you were young, and you program into them. So the event occurs, and all of a sudden you're frozen, just like you were when Dad was standing over you with that look on his face. So this is it's about personal work. Again, it's about awareness and insight. You have to sit with your awareness, understand the roots of your emotions, develop an insight about them, free yourself from it, move forward. And that's personal work. It often takes quite a bit of time. EMDR or other types of techniques help. Work with a licensed clinical person. And I will warn you all that there are therapists out there who are ready to tell you what you saw and how it was related to the Galactic Federation. They've literally done it to me. And tell you all about what it is that happened to you before you even really get the story out of your mouth to begin with. They're already explaining it to you. And that's not something you want to tolerate. You want to turn around and put your back to it and walk away as fast as you can. And in another situation, I had a clinical therapist, a licensed psychologist who I considered her pretty bright, and she was very good with trauma. And I got a lot of very intensive trauma work with her. And in the process, she's got this opinion about how there's us, and then there's them, and then there's the guys beyond them, and it's all got this nice little organization to it. And this all started creeping out in the conversations, and then somewhere down the road, she said she was in love with me, and that was
Well,
at that point I walked away. I couldn't stay. That's like an ultimate violation.
and that
And
was a person, and you've talked about this on the show before, but that was a person that you were introduced to by
Dr. Haynes.
Dr. Haynes, but also wasn't Kit Green.
No.
Okay.
This wasn't related to any of that.
Okay.
They came out of Dr. Haynes' corner. These were volunteers who wanted to get involved, and a lot of folks don't know this. Dr. Haynes was a perceptual psychologist. Okay, so he worked in human factors. He worked on the interface between humans and machines, right? Designed interiors to Skylab, things like that. So, created the cockpit design for the 737, this kind of thing. He wrote a book called UFOs and Behavioral Psychologist, which is a tome, and it's out there. Actually, I think you can get an e-copy of it for free off the NICAP website. But what I again, I be very, very careful. Make sure you're getting what you paid for. That you're paying for it. Don't take it for free. Don't let people in your head that aren't accountable legally and professionally for what they do. And then carefully work things through. And don't be surprised if trauma work has very little to do with your UFO exposure and you spend a lot of time talking about your mother or something. These are all parts of how you work through trauma, and have a little trust in them when they take you down those roads. So anyway, that's my advice as far as mental health and UAP exposures go. It's no joke. It can really wreck your life. And depending on the type of exposure you have, it can be really a challenge to just get from day to day.
And then who you have to deal with once you get involved in trying to find the answers in a field full of dimwits. So,
well, charlatans and predators. There are people out there whose egos are such that they would rather destroy you than let you participate. And I've run into a couple of those. You're well aware of one or two of them.
Well, and people that want to be cult figures, I mean, just, I mean, you look at Ramtha and that whole band of merrymen.
Yeah. And now the channeler of Ramtha is on the board of MUFON, JZ Knight.
Is she still?
I haven't looked lately, but last I heard she was a board member.
Well, she definitely donated a lot, for sure. And that's a great question. And I'm just going to say that in 2 weeks, I'll be interviewing Rob Switek, who's on the MUFON board of directors. Right. And so I will ask him that. I'm sure he'll be excited. But I like Rob. So I just want to go back because I've got some questions that I want to catch up to in chat. And thank you all. And Steve, welcome to the show. And welcome to the show. And all of you. So, and Jay Bench and Phil. Another one of my favorite partners in crime. But I want to ask you, like, and Peter wants me to ask you, did you have any cases with regard to missing time in pilots in flight?
Yes. We had a couple of cases. These are kind of historical cases. They go back a couple of decades, but pilots that claim to, during the middle of an observation, to have had an encounter, and then when they got back, they had way more fuel in their tank than they should have had for the time that they were out. So if you think about that, they didn't burn gas. They were out there. They had a certain amount of fuel that they needed in order to make their journey and arrive at their destination. They arrived late with more gas than they should have. That's an example. We've had a few others. There was actually a story around, I believe it was the USS Kennedy, coming back to Norfolk from maneuvers down towards Cuba back in like 1971. They had a couple of aircraft flying cap. One of them was a fueler version of this fighter bomber, and then the other one is the fighter version of it that was flying higher. And they would come down for a refuel, right, then go back up again. And these two planes flying cap, coming back, and they had an encounter. And the crewman woke up after a period of time with a story of being inside of something, and then they woke up in a free fall with the engines off and had to do a cold start.
Wow. And
fire up their aircraft. So we have a number of stories that are unusual like that. And I imagine that my experience looking at global aviation, there are a lot more stories that we just don't hear because we're not there. Things happen in South America. Things happen in Africa. Nobody knows what's going on in Africa, right? And China. And there's basically a half the globe, never mind the oceans, that we don't really know what kind of activity is taking place out there. But pilots and air crews continue to have these encounters and observations, and it's all part of the puzzle.
And so when you're getting, case reports that are coming in, like maybe from Russia, maybe from China, maybe from, a different country that might have motivations that aren't necessarily, they're trying to figure things out from a perspective that it's not a UFO case, right? they're
Right.
doing some sort of intelligence mission,
Mhm.
blah blah blah. Women, how do you separate things like that?
I generally make a note that it's happening. And it's fairly easy to tell in some places, like China, for example, they have a closed internet. So when you start seeing Chinese activity on your website, particularly with IP addresses, there's good reason to be suspicious. And if you look a little closer, for example, I wrote a guide for pilots, basically a pilot advisory on UAP and what the encounters are like and what to expect so that they don't hit the ground flat-footed, right? And I put that out, global response, and from everywhere, and often centers of government, a lot of kind of .mil type addresses or .gov type addresses coming from everywhere, from like Australian Civil Aviation Authority to multiple cities in China. That normally they come and hit every day, and you just see China. You don't see an IP address, and they're just checking the character count on your website, right? So if you haven't changed your site that day, that's all you're going to get. But they'll do it every 24 hours, like clockwork, and at least on mine they do. And then when I publish something, all of a sudden I get multiple hits with IP addresses, from various Chinese cities that if you dig into it a little bit, if you really want to know, you can see that they're intelligence centers or military centers or aviation hubs or whatever. And then a lot of them, you can tell that it's just pilots passing it around, pilot underground. They're in ready room somewhere, and it showed up as a link, and pops up. But the bottom line is that the world is interested in this phenomenon. It's looking carefully. A lot of it is because they want to understand American sensing capacity and and what kind of aircraft we have, whether or not they believe that these things are incursions from somewhere else. And so there's data to be gathered that way, and I'm really careful about that. Those are things that I don't necessarily want to tip my hand with. If I get information from military pilots, I really tone it down. But on the flip side, because the world wants to know, and because like we're doing this work with AIAA, I'm doing this work with AIAA, we want global engagement. We want everybody talking about this. We want to pull safety groups and teams together from everywhere, share information, come up with ideas, see what we can do in terms of offsetting what it's been, and make the skies a bit safer because of it. And whatever we learn in the process is everybody's information. This is what open science is. That could come back to bite us in the end, but I really don't. It's kind of like information on pandemics. You really don't have a right to keep an Ebola outbreak secret, or any kind of an outbreak really secret. And I think that that's going to end up being a discussion at some point, is whether you have a right to keep UAP activity secret. Because it overlaps so much with military activity and everything else, it's a loaded can of worms, but it's a serious question.
It is a serious question, and that's one that's probably never going to be broached. I mean, how can you be? I mean, there's so many. Yeah, I mean, security.
Yeah,
The defense.
yeah.
That's a pretty big one
Countries at
there.
war,
Yep.
adversarial relationships,
So,
all of that.
yep, and
It's
that
it's it's
can
very tricky.
It is very tricky. And I want to just say again, just great conversation in chat tonight, as always. I appreciate you guys being here on a Saturday night. And also I wasn't here last week. I just have been feeling a little under the weather and stuff. But thanks, you guys are all here. So I really appreciate it. And thanks, Lord Ludacris, for being here. We have a question from We Are Our Vultures, and she is wondering, what the favorite, what are some good books that you would recommend in this subject? Because I've got thousands of books here, and they're
Hmm.
interesting to look at from like from a research perspective, from a historical perspective. But I know that they're a little kooky. But what would you say if you were to give somebody the top three books to read? What would they be?
Oh, well, I liked Ivan Sanderson's book, Ivan T. Sanderson, and the name escapes me right now, but you probably know what it is. And it's an old book. It was the early '70s, I think, when he wrote it. You might have it on your shelf
I'm
out
sure I
there.
do. I know I do. And I can't remember the name
Uh,
of it right now, but
but anyway, Sanderson's book was pretty good. Some of John Keel's work was actually really good, um, and particularly documenting the Ohio Valley um, flap at the time. That's a pretty good story, to read up on. Um, I think Ruppelt's book is pretty good reading as well. So that'd be my three right off. Would be, and they're old books, and it shows you just how little traction we've had in 50 years. That we're still saying the same thing that was said in 1954. You know,
yes, we are. And I have to
and
say that I love, like, oh my gosh, one of my, I mean, I actually do really enjoy reading Dr. Haynes' books.
Mhm, mhm.
I've loved his books over the years. There are, you know, messengers of deception. I really can't speak English tonight. That's an interesting read. Some of Jacques Ballet's work. What else? Oh, and Gordon Lohr, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah,
So
yeah.
he did great work, and I miss him
I,
dearly. I was just thinking about him today, but
I think Powell and Sword's book on the history of ufology or UFOs, I think, is pretty good. I don't remember the exact title, but that's really an interesting tome and well prepared. There's a lot of information in there by, I mean, Mike Swords is a consummate scholar, and I have a lot of respect for
and that was
Robert.
the book with Richard Thiem and Barry Greenwood and Jan Aldrich that contributed, right?
I think so. Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
that
yeah,
is a good
yeah.
one.
It's been out a few years. Yeah. So those are reads I'd recommend, but actually there's just not that much out there that's been written that really will tell you what you want to know as far as actual real information goes. There's most of it is speculation. It's the perspective of the author. It's not driven by solid data, that's building on a fact base. And I've gotten to the point where that's really all I care about anymore because I've seen every UFO movie there is. I've seen I've seen every I've read as many papers as I could get my hands on, and I really want to know what the facts are for what I've seen.
Absolutely. And I've got to just go back and say clear intent should be number one. And it
Tim,
is,
Tim, Tim Good's first book as well. Timothy Good, the first book he wrote. And again, I'm just having these moments. I'm not able to pull it in. I don't read them that much these days. I don't
yeah,
look
you
at
know,
that
and
stuff.
I know, and in fact, I was just talking about Tim Good the other day, and oh my gosh, I need to have a little list here, but obviously that one didn't, anyway, but yeah, so
Well, and a lot of these folks, they were strong in the beginning, and something about them changed. You know, I'm thinking of Linda Moulton Howe, for example. In the beginning, she was a pretty darn good investigator. Um, and I'll just leave that there. And that goes for a number of people in this field that seem to change. They started with good promise, and then they sort of became what ufology makes you. I just didn't go down that road. You won't find a book written by me. At some point, I'll write one, but I'm not here to write books and make money out of it. I didn't come here to impress anybody. I'm here to get an answer, and I'd like to bring everybody along if I can. But I'm going to go there, if it's at all possible. So
interesting. Well, and I should do a show and just talk about all of the books and some of the great people. Greg Long, wrote a great book about the Yakima Indian Reservation, and there's so many people that I can just look back and I don't know. There's so many things. So I need to do a show dedicated to my favorite books, and then asking people like you, asking people like Barry, Jan, some of the legends in the field, like what their favorite books are,
mhm.
and things to give people a good idea on what to do. And I love John Fuller,
Mhm.
Incident in Exeter, and so many things. And so anyway, we'll just, I will get back to you guys on that. We'll have a conversation, a show about it. So it's a lot of fun, very interesting.
One book I'd throw in the ring, even though it's controversial, is Corso's book, Day After Roswell. A lot of people have issues around the Roswell thing, but I actually bit off a piece of that and went and researched it. And if you look at the history of night vision and its development, it runs exactly parallel to Corso's description of how that came to be, sans the aliens, but it involved people that are known to ufology. Dr. Luis Alvarez, for example, and some of the others who are in the background steering these supposedly steering these programs while they're there, and a lot of this kind of came down the way he described it. I wouldn't say that it's a fact all the way around, but I think there are grains of truth in some of these stories. And
Well, that's the hard thing. I think there are grains of truth in a lot of it, but it's just that you've got these con artists that come in and step up, or people that are purposefully spreading disinformation, that take little bits and pieces, what a better way, so I think it would be another fun show is to have a very lively debate about Corso.
yeah,
You
yeah,
now
I
bring on, I can think of a
sure,
couple other people,
sure, and it's just interesting. You can talk around it. I remember I was sitting with Dr. Putoff, Hal Putoff, many years ago, and he told me that he had a manuscript of the original Day After Roswell that Corso had written, and that he actually lived. He was a neighbor of the Corso family on some lake somewhere, and so these stories have threads and connections that kind of move around inside the
Putoff said that
field.
he was friends with Corso, like an old
Yeah,
friend.
the Corso family lived next door to his family. They had a vacation cabins adjacent on a lake,
Hmm.
which is kind of an old intelligence community trick. Um, so, these stories, they have legs, and I hear bits and pieces here, bits and pieces there, and then I just throw it all out the window because I'm trying to get somewhere in particular, and all of
Good.
that's just distraction. I
Yeah,
wanted
no
to
good.
mention also to everybody here, I'm in Hawaii. As you can see, I've got all this jungle and stuff behind me here, but I got a little rain coming, so I'm gonna have to wipe my lens off here if it gets a little
Oh,
bit
well,
fuzzy.
good
Just
for you for hanging in there. I'm sorry. And if you need
just
to go,
let me
just,
know.
yeah,
Oh,
let,
it's missed. Okay, we're not going to get. I don't think we're going to get anything dramatic at the moment.
well, it looks
So
beautiful there. And I need to get out of Utah. Oh, God. Help me. I'd be happy if I could go 2 blocks out of my bubble, is what would be really helpful. Oh, see, that looks so
yeah,
pretty that way.
yeah.
But
Getting
so,
away.
and
Those are banana trees and
And so
nuisance.
when I do,
Okay.
Steve, so Steve had a question, and thank you for the donation to, and thanks to all of you who have done that this evening. I appreciate it. And he wanted to know a little bit about the term UAP and Richard Haynes and where that came into play. And I know you've mentioned that on different shows, but if you could just refresh our memory or tell new people that are listening.
Well, the term unidentified aerial phenomena was well, it was a common phrase. I mean, you'll find it in throughout ufological references, but it's a phrase. It's a description. It's not a. Dr. Haynes made a proper noun out of it with a definition, and he did that in 1980 when he was working with QFOS and Dr. Hynek, and he kept that in his back pocket for a long time. Didn't really use it anywhere. But when we published our first paper, Aviation Safety in America, a previously neglected factor, we published that in 2000, and the description, the definition of UAP is right there. And we had decided then that we were going to introduce it as an alternative term to UFO because UFO carried too much baggage. We couldn't. It wasn't objective anymore, and it wasn't accurate because a lot of the things that people report are lights, not objects. So you can't validate that it's an object. So calling it an unidentified flying object is not necessarily accurate. And so we promoted the term, and within a couple of years, ufology picked it up. And within a couple of years, we were briefing congressmen in I think it was like 2003 or something, and we got the term into Podesta's hands, and that's where Hillary Clinton mentioned, UAP, that's the new term now. I think she said it in an interview, and it picked up from there and went viral. And now it carries the same baggage that UFO did. It's pretty much useless as far as I'm concerned. But that's the history of the term. It was interesting that DeLong and all these other people picked it up, but they didn't bother to find the definition for it. They just made up one. And If you want to know the actual definition of it, it's on the NARCAP website, narcap.org. So, but yeah, that term is Dr. Haynes' term, and it's one that we all decided as a group that we were going to use that. We actively corrected each other anytime we didn't, so that's how it started.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I just want to go back to, because we were talking a little bit about Linda Moulton Howe and Stephen Greer and things. And it's very interesting because I've got an old picture of all of them. I mean, there are probably 10 people in this picture. And the picture is 25 years old. And it's, Greer, it's Bigelow, and Linda's hanging on Bigelow. And, just a very interesting group of people. And you look at that and you think, so this was at a time when, because now they've, this person hates this person, and I think it's all just a game. It's just a show. They're all working together. They have been from the beginning. And there are people that have taken other people's work and plagiarized it and reworded things, to make it seem that it's all their own. And I know that Steve made a really great point in chat about people lifting Tom Adams and Dave Perkins' mutilation research and things like that to put a spin on it. And I know there have been some questions about another well-known figure in this subject doing that as well. And that's unfortunate, but then again, they seem to be doing all right, and they're on every TV show known to man, and they're making a ton of money and have a lot of, girls that like to show up and get their books signed by the favorite.
Oh yeah, that it's out there. And the thing to understand, there's 2 points here. First off, again, we're talking about the age of ufology when it was based on visual observation. And so basically, all you had was stories, and anybody could do anything they wanted with a story. It was just how bold they were in terms of what they wanted to say. And there was no way to validate it. Hell, there was hardly an internet at that point. So, as far as people getting information out or up or anything, or making personalities out of themselves, that it was very different than it is now. And but the drive was kind of the same. It was to create content that attracted revenue and made them important, or gave them whatever nourishment that they got out of being associated with the field. And so of course, this whole idea that if you affiliate, that somehow makes you stronger and more credible. For example, me, here I am. I've got pictures of me sitting in panels with Bolee and Haynes and Heisch and Dr. Michio Kaku and all kinds of people, but I don't go around. The only reason I ever share any of those things is because I'm as amazed about it as anybody else is. But the bottom line is that I don't associate with those guys. They're not doing what I'm doing. They're not interested in doing what I'm doing. They might be interested in the results of what I'm doing, but they're not here to move the field. They're here for other reasons. Mm-hmm. And we see this even stronger now. In the last couple of years, we're seeing content producers everywhere, right? You've been in the game for a long time, and I've associated with you for a long time, but there are hundreds of new podcasts and articles and writing and all kinds of people trying to move themselves into some kind of an authoritative position around the subject. And I really don't have any time for it myself, and I think any discerning person can recognize it grandstanding pretty quickly and not be taken in by it. It's useless. There's no point in it. These star worship, hero worship, this kind of thing. What they tell you, you don't want to meet your heroes. They're flawed individuals. I could tell you stories about Dr. Haynes and others that I worked with that are not flattering. Okay, because they're human beings. And that's why ufology has been high-centered for 70 years. And it has to do a lot with the personalities that we call leaders in the field. They didn't have that single-mindedness to get to the answer. And I've met all of these people that you talk about pretty much, and usually by accident because I didn't really want to. And there's just no point in it. Here I am. I've finally matriculated out of ufology into the mainstream. How come I'm the only one? Where are the rest of all the geniuses that wrote all the books that have been standing on the podiums telling us all about what they think about all this stuff.
They're eating a
How come
buffet in Laughlin.
exactly? I just and that's my point. Is just that where are how many good minds are there, because they should be percolating to the top,
They're
and
they're
they're not.
creating fake resumes about working for the DoD when they actually taught aerobics for children.
Or what was it? They're trying to find relevance now. And this is something you're going to see. Ufology is morphing. And what you're going to see is that the people who are personalities are struggling to try and maintain relevance in the field, while the people that are actually got something to offer are going to move into the mainstream, where there's an interest in what they say and they do. And ufology, you're going to see it move more and more to the right, more and more into the conspiracy and extreme and weirdness. It's just
And I agree, but I think it's definitely, oh Lord, we've got, yeah, that's, and I think, things just like politically, and I mean, things are coming to the surface and personalities are coming forward, and then you're seeing more of this kind of right wing extremism coming to the surface, and people being very proud of that in the UFO community, which is just mind boggling to me, but it is interesting,
right.
and it's good that you're going, I mean, that you're moving forward in the direction that everybody should be moving forward, and you've got the opportunity to do that, which is really great. So
Well,
kudos to you.
facts don't have politics, and if you believe something, fact check your belief. Keep in mind what I said earlier. If you really think that we've got aliens visiting us, then we've got some questions to answer quickly, because it doesn't look like a good situation. Okay, if that's what's going on, they don't respect political boundaries, personal boundaries, mental or physical. You can go through a long list of why this is not necessarily a good thing to be going on, and and I think that if you take it seriously, then you want to be responsible and careful. I've gone from being the guy that was willing to talk to people, just randomly about this stuff. I don't talk to them at all. People come up and, Ted, I hear you do the UFO thing. What do you think about this? And my response, instead of answering them, is to ask them if they like their life. Do you like the life you live? Do you like the idea that you came from a past and it's going to a future, and that things are marching in a direction, and your kids are going to have kids and their kids are going to have kids, and you're going to die in the next bunch, and there's continuity in the life of being a human being in a human society? Do you like that? Then don't ask me that question. You're not going to like the answer necessarily. And that's kind of where I'm at right now, is that having this kind of interaction, if this is what it is not a good thing.
But then, and you and I have had many discussions about about this, many heated discussions about this over the years and things. And I mean, you have had your experiences that have shaped you, as
Oh, yeah.
have I, and things. And does it? I mean, is it putting the threat narrative on it? I mean, that sounds to me something that Elizondo would do to bolster, to try to get funding for something. I mean, is it an important thing when we're trying to broach this scientifically, to not put that level of fear about this into the do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, but my point is, we shouldn't be whistling past the graveyard. We need to get an answer to this. And if you're one of these people that believes that the answer involves a non-human intelligence, then respect that and get the real answers. Don't sit around and imagine the Galactic Federation and all the other stuff. The word alien, it means not like us and probably not compatible. Okay, so projecting human values on a non-human intelligence could be a grave error. All right. So using your insight, using your awareness, and sitting quietly and knowing that there are things of this earth, and if you're going to contemplate things that are not of this earth, then make sure that you do it in a perspective that's realistic and not fantasy driven. And the last thing you want to do is go around with people who've had these exposures and try to mislead them with what you think is going on. The whole thing just muddies the water. We need real answers, not people's projections. Well, it's just folks, they're just visiting. They're just look.
No, but I mean, I think
Just
that
visiting.
when you look at like the movie Contact, or you look at, I mean, so there are other life forms out there do we choose to engage them and blow the crap out of them, like we would being a human being, or Vladimir Putin, I mean, is that our choice, or do we try to look at it from a different perspective, and how do we find, how do we engage it, where we're taking both of those considerations, benevolent, malevolent, into account?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is understand our predicament. Understand the situation we're in, and with that, if we're doing physical studies of these things and they turn out to be devices that are probably not technical expressions from a non-human intelligence, then we're going to understand in the analysis of the physics of what they're doing, some of their potential. And is that something that we can go toe to toe with, or do we want to sit quietly and watch? Because we're really, I don't think we're in any kind of mode to stand it off. And secondly, I'm not an advocate for war. I'm not looking for the worst things that could happen to us out there. But I know what I've been through, and I know what other people have been through. And to me, I wouldn't let a human being do that to me. And it's not a misunderstanding, because every creature has a boundary. I spend my life dealing with animals of all kinds, and everything is about understanding their boundaries and knowing how to approach them. And whether I'm dealing with a dog or a shark or any of the creatures that I deal with, it's the same, right? You study them carefully, you understand their boundaries, you don't violate those boundaries, you let them express themselves, and you don't project yourself on them. And that's how you understand them. And then comes a question of whether you need to kill one or not, and that's a whole different game. But that first step needs to happen, particularly if we think that we're in a situation involving non-human intelligences. The chances are these things are quite advanced, and that they probably, we don't know what their biological or cultural imperatives are. So we don't know how they organize themselves. We don't know what's important. We don't know why they're in space. We don't know how long they've been in space, et cetera, et cetera. These are all questions I would ask if we found ourselves actually looking at the answer being a non-human intelligence. I don't know. Okay, I know what I saw, but I don't know through science, to be able to tell you factually. So if you're going to weigh these possibilities, then these are the things you need to think about when you're moving through it. Do they respect boundaries? If they're intelligent, by golly, they must. And if they don't, what does it tell you? We have very intelligent people around us. Some respect boundaries. Some will come and try and steal your country and hold nukes to your head, keep you from getting in the way of it. So it's a very animalistic thing. It's not much different than a dog getting a bone in its mouth and looking at the other dogs and growling at them. It's very base, right? And it's something that we all understand. That's why we're all up in arms right now about it. And why would it be any different in dealing with a non-human intelligence? Why would they not understand that there's alarm involved with all of this, and that some of these reported activities are not acceptable, period. And it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. You don't get to do that. You don't get to grab people. You don't get to do whatever it is they're doing. I spoke a little bit with, I was asking one of my colleagues, pretty bright guy, and I said, well, if they're master nanotechnologists and master biomolecular engineers, what do you suppose their capacity for surveillance is? What is the possibility if there is a non-human intelligence involved in all of this, that they know who you are, or they know who I am, that they're actually checking the internet and hearing what we have to say and think? These considerations come with implications. So if you're going to consider that we're having incursions, then these are things you need to be thinking about, not some Dayglow poster of some alien goddess, coming to take your seat.
I'm just thinking the tall Nordics, man.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Shizzle.
Well, and I'm not laughing at any of those people. You know what I mean? In terms of that say they've seen these things. Okay, I know I've seen some things, and I'm not laughing, but evidence is evidence, and without it, the conversation isn't strong. We aren't able to get anywhere.
And so here's a question for you. let's say, based on what that you've researched, do you believe that there is a non-human intelligence, or are they artificial, biological, or hybrid?
I couldn't even guess on those things. And as far as my research goes and the work I've goes, it hasn't revealed any such thing. Okay, I've not gotten enough data or information to be able to say something like that. Okay, I can tell you anecdotally from my own experiences that the things I saw were seemed biological, but hell, we weren't standing right next to each other, and I don't know the answers. Nobody told me anything. I just saw what was in front of me. I don't know what to conclude from it. So other than the core of it, which has kept me in this game for 22 years and had me putting up with every kind of BS and sweating blood for throughout the whole thing, trying to get to the next level.
But I think though you are saying, I mean, you've got here are your experiences, but it's important to look at the research, the data, what where does the data go, and it is important not to lead people. Like there are a group of people going around. Well, I mean, I'm not even going to name names. I'm sure we all know who they are, but they again, they're doing these. They're pulling people in to do these studies, and they've been doing the studies for, oh my gosh, 5 years, and they're studying the effects. And you've got the people that are saying there's out of world radiation levels, and putting labels on things. It's like, what is that, and why? And you're leading people, and I think that's so dangerous, especially if we're trying to look at this objectively and without bias. And so I think, I don't know, I think it's just interesting. It's an interesting subject, and I'm glad that there are people engaged that can step back and look at things as they're coming in, and have interesting conversations about that and see where people lead. And I want to just ask or see where things go. Steve wanted me to ask, and I want to say, Steve, it's really nice to see you here. Thank you very much. He wants to know, he said, I might have missed this, but what are your hopes with the AIAA over the next few years?
Well, we want to establish ourselves as a neutral body that's grounded in solid science and engineering, and facilitate the dialogues that will help develop strategies and modalities for detecting and mitigating UAP-related safety factors, and stand off the stigma against engaging UAP studies. A lot of that, of course, is about providing actual data that a scientist can look at. If you give them something to look at, they'll look at it. But if it's just nonsense, or it's somebody's story, I mean, why would anybody risk their image on that? So yeah, that's I guess hopefully that answers your question, Steve.
Yeah, no, that's great. And Steve, it's nice to see you here. So it's nice to have you here live. But let's talk about some of the stuff, some of the things that Erling Strand and Massimo Teodoranti and people like that have encountered. Because when you look at the way things, I believe, should be done, they've done exceptional work over the decades. And so, but they're functioning in a world that isn't America. I mean, it's not American ufology. And so they don't have all of the handicaps that we do here with all the BS brokers and people that are leaking documents. Only like the same two people are leaking documents, allegedly, that can't really be verified. But anyway, that's just me going there. I'm sorry. I go on these tangents. You just have to smack. And I did hear somewhere that there was a group of people that every time I said Bigelow, they took a shot. And I would just love to say, that is a good drinking game, you guys. Dang. Yeah, you better let me know. Let's get in here and see some drunk talk over here with Bigelow. Good night. Okay. Anyway, so I don't know. Anyway, I get slap happy. What can I say? It's been a long week, but I mean, so I don't even know what I was going to say. Wow. And I have not been drinking shots.
Right.
I know that was good, wasn't it?
Well, I think this is kind of at the core of you and I, and where we sort of diverge is that your focus is on these people, and these bad actors, and they are all bad actors, just about all of them. Anyone that you could name that's actually made a reputation for themselves in this field, they're not what the field needs. Okay, and in that sense, that's part of the reason why I've turned my back on ufology for the most part. I don't really associate with anybody in the field. I've had them all around me, Leslie Keene and Lee and all these people, and I just want to go another way. Thank you.
And so let me just ask you that, because you talk about new voices coming forward, and then you look at some of the new shows that are on some pretty major networks and things, and they've got this handful of people, Mellon, Keene, yada,
Right.
yada, yada. And so what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I could...
The team with the AIAA team sat around one day, and they were talking about, different shows, different offerings that were out there on the subject. And they asked my opinion on it, kind of like now. And my response was, I don't watch that stuff. I don't watch any of it. And because I've sat with enough producers and watched enough nonsense around all of this to know that they're more concerned with selling advertising, and anything that says UFO in the title is what they're doing. They're not contributing. They're sharing information that other people are bringing to them, and a lot of times it's not well vetted. And there are thousands and thousands of hours of UFO television, and I could probably tell you just about everything that's known about UFOs in 10 or 15 minutes. So what does that tell you? It's just not. I don't find any of that particularly useful. I don't spend a lot of time on it. I got suckered into a Discovery Channel production here last September. They wanted me to come in and talk a little bit about a case that I had done some work on, that a freight hauler over Mexico. And they were going to bring in the pilot and interview him and this whole thing. So I come into this I get flown down there, right? And I come into this, and I'm on a set. It's got a big light table. The leader of the investigation team is there, and he's wearing an eye patch. He's a former SWAT officer, and there's a big guy there that's kind of the Joe average guy, and then there's the pretty journalist, right? And it's this whole kind of staged thing, and the next thing I know, I'm going through 20 takes of acting, and it's acting. It's not Q&A. It's not a lot of things you and I have done when we have done TV. It was something else entirely, and I don't feel particularly bad about what was in the production, but it was just the way that it was gone about and the way I was pulled in on it. I won't be going back. These shows have a purpose, and it's not to illuminate on UAP. Otherwise it would be of a different story and would have a different caliber to it.
Well, and it's not sexy. I mean, climbing up mountains and collecting information, and doing, so that's not sexy, so I can understand. Well, I can't. I mean, you got to use the same shtick to sell the same show after show. But I will say that I just can't. Like, I turn through, my TV now, and it's like if I see a UFO show, I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
Unless I want to, really, get some anxiety out of me, anger. And I can sit there and watch. Really? Okay, you're going to talk about shifting werewolves and your EEGs and your little, I don't know what the camera's like, all blurry, and oh my God, it's a dog. Nope, just kidding. It's a werewolf. It's like freaking.
Oh yeah.
But
I could tell it was not human.
It was not human.
But just for your audience, I'm aware of some hotspots. I'm aware of places where UAP are seen, and they involve both structured objects and light phenomena. And one of them happens to be a very, very busy place. I took you out there, Erica. Mm-hmm. And we saw some things that we're still scratching our chins over. But in 15 years of knowing that that place was there and knowing that it's productive, knowing that there's a good reason to go and look at it, I've been unable to get just about anybody to go out there. And the last time I tried to set it up, I had 10 days set aside, which was, to me, was just a huge opportunity. By day 3, everybody was gone. And I had to get on a plane and go home. And that's the thing. People don't want to sit there and wait and watch, even though there's something to be seen. And if they don't want to do that work, then how the hell is we ever going to get to an answer on any of this stuff? I mean, frankly, when I make plans for staking out a hotspot, I want to give it 3 months.
Absolutely. And I want somebody to actually fund me. I mean, get me the right equipment. I mean, give me, pay for my, I don't know. I mean, anything. Pay for my radio show. I mean, whatever. It's like.
And that's the reality of it. You know, you can sell advertising and talk about this stuff on TV, but in terms of going and getting yourself funded and getting people willing to put their butts down and pay attention and take notes and follow the protocols and collect the data is very, very, very. And I've had literally no success at it whatsoever. And I was in a situation that made Close Encounters look like a movie.
Well, I mean, and then you sit there and you think, I mean, there are podcasts or, you know, whatever, there are YouTube shows and different projects going on in the UFO world, and they're making so much money. It is absolutely insane to me. And all they're doing is, you know, you know, it's or even the 22 million that the Pentagon, you know, what came of that? I mean, that went to, you know, I mean,
I look at the money spent on one of these TV productions and go, God, what could I do with the $100,000 that they spent pulling that together? You know, or the $1 million, you know, pulling that together, you know, what? But you know, I'm not taken seriously that way. That I took some heart though. Avi Loeb, Dr. Loeb, he put it out there that he wanted to look into this seriously, and all of a sudden people started showing up and throwing money at him. Last I talked to him, he had over $2 million on a pile, and was putting together a team, and he was taking me seriously about Professor Strand and Dr. Teodorani and hotspot research. So in that sense, you know, there's a little bit of traction, I'm hoping, you know, but that's the reality of it. I've got a hotspot 100 miles from here that should be staked out constantly. Okay. And I got people that want to know where it is so they can bring a production team there to shoot a 15-minute segment of a television show and then move on. Oh, they need to know where it is so they can do that. But does anybody really want to come and do the work, you know, and see what I saw?
I would if I had the money.
Sure,
you know?
sure.
I mean, that's the thing, and I know that with Erling, you know, and the team over in Norway. I mean, they have worked tirelessly and have struggled sometimes to obtain funding to do what they've done.
They got grants.
They have, but it hasn't been, you know, you know, it's been a road for them and things, and so it's you just wonder, you know, what I mean. It would be great and ideal if we could get funding. You could get funding and go out and do some research in some of these hotspots. I would love to do that. That was my big passion for a while, and it's fun. It's fun. It's boring. It's tiring. It's dirty.
and sometimes it's absolutely what you went there for, and that makes it all okay. I'm in Hawaii. I'm on the Big Island. I've got a hotspot not far from here. I had been told by the priestess that keeps the temple at this hotspot that things happen there. I've been told by local people that things happen there. Visitors and guests from around the world had mentioned these things as well. I swam there all the time. I teach free diving and I do swimming tours and this kind of thing. And so I spent thousands of hours in that particular place. And one night about 2 o'clock in the morning, I was there and something happened and I saw it. And it was exactly the way the priestess described it. It was exactly what it was. And it was definitely tech. I don't know whose it was. Got to guess.
Are there people though that you know in that area that could keep a log of things, or just keep you?
I wouldn't put it on them. I wouldn't put it on them. The place is a lot like, you know, this is South Kona. It's a lot like Sedona. witches per square inch, right?
Okay, good point.
Every middle-aged female that's divorced has shown up out here and declared herself a shaman, and she's swimming with the dolphins and
I will
girls.
see you next week.
Hey, it's a racket. Come on out. They make hundreds and hundreds of dollars
Sweet.
a day doing it.
Found my next calling in life.
Yeah, I'll help you with it. I'll be the guy that shows you them the special breeding technique that makes the
Oh,
dolphins come closer.
oh, I think I already
Yeah.
know that. It's okay.
And, I've been well. Okay, well, good. I, for your audience, I swam with dolphins, pods of dolphins alone as a freediver for about 4 years, and then I did a lot of photography around it. I spent a lot of time in the ocean, a lot of time alone, and I actually had 3 of my students come to me and tell me that they saw a UFO under the superpod of dolphins. They sought me out. They came to find me one at a time to tell me about that. So things happen. The stories are there. It's anecdotal, but you got to be there. I'm in the water. There was a time when I'm swimming probably 3,000-4,000 hours. A year,
Oh,
3,000 hours a year. It's just
wow.
every day for 7 or 8 hours a shot, and but it's free diving, so it's breath hold diving, not tanks, and teaching people how to do that. So it kind of ingratiated me. It got me in with the kumus and the priests. And this is a little bit of info I can share with your people too. And that I've sat and drank kava with the kumu, and they talk a little bit about UFOs. And they tell me that they came around the same time the white man did. That they didn't have UFO stories until that point. Now they have an oral tradition. They memorized it. They've got women that know they know which rock somebody tripped over before he was killed and where he fell, and what his name was and what his parents' name were and who his brother was and what they had for dinner that night. And it's all been documented 1,000 years back, and they've got it all here.
So cool.
And then
Wow.
I was in Australia on Wonga Beach, in the town of Wonga Beach, which is just south of the Daintree, on the eastern coast of Australia, talking to clever men. And this is a culture with 50,000 years of oral tradition behind it. They've got 5 names for everything at least. Secret names. All their magic is based on names, knowing names. They don't have a name for UFO, and they're as terrified of them as everybody else. So the idea of what people tell you that they know and what the native people know and what this is, and that, take it with a grain of salt. Don't commit yourself to beliefs on this. Find out or gray file it. Where it could be, gray file it. Focus on what you can find that's solid, and put your weight on that. First.
Absolutely. Well, I always love having conversations with you. It's just, we have just lively discussions and things that I've learned a lot from you, and we've learned patience from each other. It's like, okay, we're just gonna let her go down.
You missed this, Eric. I was reaching for the camera. But yeah, it's been a real pleasure because you have a high view, right? Where you're interacting with a lot of people. You have historical background. Your work with archiving, I think, is terribly important, and those files of Andropples in particular are really important. I'm working on getting Dr. McCampbell's files moved into your bailiwick as well. So yeah, it's nice to be able to talk to people, and particularly somebody that's been through a lot of the same crap I've been through, as far as the slings and arrows of ufology and moving on. So
Well, it's been a trip.
good to know you.
It's good to know you too, and it's fun to, just to. I don't know. I hope we can get another trip together and go sit out there for 10 days and get equipment, get funding, do something like that. I just think it would be a lot of fun and see what this is all about. But in the meantime, it's like this is a trip, and I'm having, most of the time I'm having a good time. Now that certain people are out of my life, I'll be having a better time. Ah.
Yeah. Well,
So excited.
you've certainly had a lot on your plate, and I'm very proud of you for the work you've done. The domestic violence work and taking up advocacy in that area is just terrifically important. And Utah and Salt Lake City are quite deficit in their mindfulness on that particular area. And it's good that you're there calling attention to it. And I'm very sorry that you found yourself with the situation that you found yourself in, and I'm glad that you're an example of pulling out of it and moving to the next level. It's really important. I think for women, and everybody needs to see that.
As you know, it's been, as you know, and everybody that listens to the show, it's been a real hard struggle for me. And I would never wish what I've gone through on anyone. And it has been, I just read today that one of the people that was in the January 6th insurrection got 4 years for hitting an officer with a metal pipe, which is great that he is being held accountable. But a domestic violence incident in Utah is a Class B misdemeanor, and my assailant, I mean, I will be lucky if he gets a year probation. And so that really speaks volumes as to what we need to work on with regard to domestic violence and how serious people take it, how serious people in Utah take it or don't take it, and what the military and police officers and people are willing to do to step up and hold people accountable, especially when there is video evidence of the incidents.
I think it's terribly telling, and it really shows the kind of hill that you have to climb on this, that they're willing to redesignate a domestic violent crime as a simple assault.
Right.
And it clears the books of the domestic violence statistic to begin with, so that they don't have to answer to how they handled it. I think that's just egregious, and I really wish you luck in terms of leaning into all of this. It's really important.
Thank you. It's going to be the next, I think, the next few months are going to be, and it's been so long anyway, and every time you go through it and go to court, it's more trauma and, as you know, and things, and it's hard to pull your head out of it. But I think hopefully some light will be shown on this subject here in Utah. I know the piece that Fox News did on my case was very important, and even though nobody in Utah stepped up to do anything about it, except for the one reporter who is incredible, but Nate Carlisle. So anyway, I'll keep just going out there and doing my thing, and thanks for the props, and thanks for the support behind the scenes and things. And so, Scott, start organizing the first Irish UFO conference. Ted and I will be there.
I will come.
Everybody here in chat will be there.
Make it worth coming to. We're working on finding new voices and diverse voices, young voices, new voices, women, but all science, STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, right? Find those new voices. GPAN would be a good source for digging into people that aren't personalities, and others. Contact me at NARCAP, Ted_Rowe at narcap.org, and I might have some references for you as well.
That's
so
great.
Good luck
with
that.
Thank you for giving yourself, thanks for telling people where to find you, because clearly I'm sleeping on the job. I'm just having so much fun. So,
That's all right. I have an access number too. It's on the website. If you go to narcap.org, you can find whatever info you want, including contact info. So
cool.
If you need to talk to me.
Thank you. I look forward to having you on many more times. So, and I want to just again, go back to just sending my love, all of our love, just in prayers and thoughts to the people that are suffering so horrifically tonight across the world. And we hope that there is I don't know, how can you even say we hope there's a good outcome? This outcome is terrible. It's been disastrous, and
I hope for the best possible outcome. I hope for the best possible outcome, and any help you can be. It's more than blessings and prayers. Send something.
Right. Yep, absolutely.
Do something. Say something at the right time to the right people.
And it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But anyway, I just have to say that I'm very grateful to all of you that you're in my life, and you, Ted, as well. And thank you all for getting in and donating to the show and being Patreons. I cannot talk, Ted. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I'm doing this show on a Saturday and I just don't know. But at least I will say I made it 2 hours with
You did?
actually unmuting and muting my mic at appropriate
Hey.
times.
And all of my stuff stayed on because I'm almost never able to do this.
It's
So,
the seventh
this is,
sign of the apocalypse.
that's it. All right. Well,
Thanks,
it's
guys.
been a pleasure. Take care, everybody. And until next time.
Okay, peace out. I'll talk to you soon.
Aloha.
Okay, seriously? Dang it. All right. Okay, I made it 2 hours. 2 hours and 6 minutes. All right. Good night, you guys.